you're out of your mind if you think I haven't put any sources in. What do you think I just spent the last 10 minutes doing here? So, we're back again.
It's good to be back.
Oh boy. Sometimes life takes a crazy turn, and yeah, we got how many episodes did we get? 3 episodes down, and then all of a sudden life just like fell apart there.
Oh, it pretty much.
So, well, we're back. We got a crazy one for tonight. This is something that have we continued on earlier would have made a little bit more sense, but we're jumping back in. So, welcome everyone. Welcome back. Yes, we're still out there. We're still kicking it, but we've been missing for a little bit. I'm Tim.
Jeremiah.
And welcome to Conflict of Leadership Coffee Table Edition. So, how you been, Jeremiah? You don't have to go crazy with everything, but how have you been?
Not too bad. Feels back to get back into swing of this. It's been too long.
Mm-hmm.
What, a month and a half?
At least. Yeah. No, I mean, when we were our last episode, it's cold today, but it was snowy and cold and miserable, and it was dark outside right now.
Yeah. And it was also snowing earlier this morning too.
Don't remind me. I remember waking up at work the other morning, seeing an inch and a half of snow on the ground. Like, no. We had tornadoes last week. We had tornadoes. Why?
And then snow.
Weather makes no sense to me. It's why I'm not a weather person, weather man, weather woman. But it makes no sense to me whatsoever. So, well, I'm otherwise doing well. We doing our spring cleaning both at work and at home. So, that's kind of got it's got its ups and downs because everyone at work wants to feel like they're doing more than anyone else. And at home, you start pulling stuff out and asking yourself, can I throw this away? And all of a sudden, everything has sentimental value. You never thought it did.
It really does.
I think I'm lucky though because there's a lot of things we said, yeah, we don't need to keep that. We can go ahead and get rid of it, which makes life much easier.
It does.
So if you're all joining us tonight, after our sabbatical and wondering, listened to your shorts, I've listened to a couple of your podcasts, wondering where you guys went. We are 2 firefighters. We've been doing this each for about anywhere from 14 to 13 years, something like that. I've been doing it about 10 years myself, and we just talk about anything in the fire service that affects us, things that bother us, things that we like, things that we enjoy. So it's kind of a no holds barred kind of deal. I did talk to a friend yesterday. He called. He actually asked specifically about the podcast and wondered when we were starting back up and how it was going. And he said he wanted to see more branching out beyond just the fire service. So some of the other safety services, military, and that kind of thing.
Oh, absolutely.
So we're gonna have to keep that on our radar here.
Oh, agreed.
So, but tonight, kind of on that, we're talking about the volunteer service and the fire service. And yeah, we're gonna put a disclaimer out there right now. We both started as volunteers.
Yes, we did.
We don't have anything necessarily against volunteers at all. We don't think that there's anything wrong if you're a volunteer. In fact, for many communities,
that's all they have.
That is all they got. So, but that being said, we also recognize that, especially in our area, many other parts of the country too, that's slowly changing. That's not it's a dying breed.
It is, and some it's faster than others too.
Yeah, I do think that the actual official statistic, see if I can pull it up here real quick. I think it's like 70% is still.
Yeah, I'm not sure on that one. I know majority of the country is mostly volunteer too. There's only like almost 4,000 full-time union departments in the country. That's it. So, I mean, like you said, we both started off as volunteers, and then we slowly became part-time. Our department is part-time, full-time. It's a slow process.
Okay, so here it is. So, per the BBC, the number of volunteer firefighters in the U.S. numbered nearly 898,000. So let's just say 900,000 just for easy numbers in 1984 and 677,000 in 2020. Um that's a what about a third almost?
Mhm.
About a third of lost in just that those 30 some years there, 25 years give or take. Um but what's interesting is that they also tout that during that time, number of calls to those departments has more than tripled from less than about 12 million nationwide in 1986 to 36.6 million in 2021.
Big jump.
Yeah. Now I'm sure a lot of that had to do with like COVID,
Oh yeah,
and because I mean 2021, all those numbers are going to be slightly skewed.
correct.
But that being said, too, I mean, it's interesting because I know for our area, the difficulty we have is that not everyone has a job that they can just leave
Hmm.
when the fire tones go off, their pager goes off, so you hear the siren at the
Yep.
fire station. That's it's rough.
It is, and even the apartments around our area, they get a call. Sometimes they go to a second page, and then
Mhm.
next thing you know, they're mutual aid next department that it needs to go to because there's no one available.
Mm-hmm. Well, and then too, this is something is slowly changing, thankfully now, but discrepancies in training too,
Mm-hmm.
because it used to be, at least state of Ohio, it used to be, they still have it by and large. I shouldn't say it used to be as in it's gone, but the 36-hour card for volunteers was like the gold standard.
Yep.
And then if your department could afford to or wanted to, they could send you to your 120 or 240. But that training difference, for anyone listening who's not really familiar, those are hours, like total like classroom hours of training that you're supposed to get in those courses. So think of any type of fire, structure fire, wildland fire, anything like that, car accidents. The difference of 36 hours of training versus 120 versus what most full-time departments require in the state of Ohio, which is a 240 certification, 240 hours. I mean, that's such a minimal amount of training. It's like a
It is.
week of training
Yeah.
for
A
your
week.
36.
When I was in fire school, I went with two guys that had their 36.
Mhm.
But that's all their department required back where they were working. So they were like, no, screw it, we're gonna go get our 240. You know,
Yeah. No, it's interesting because I haven't come across a lot who've had their 36 solely. There's one or two, but in the fire scenes themselves, the ones I have, it's interesting. First of all, if they're older, they've had a lot of experience, they have the actual real world knowledge to kind
correct.
of bridge the gap. But anyone who is closer to our age who went and got it gave them a real false sense of security
Mm-hmm.
because they got a little bit fired. They kind of learned how things worked and how things were supposed to be done, but they didn't get any of the theory behind what
Right.
they're supposed to do.
Yeah. So guy I went to fire school with that had his 36. He said pretty much enough to learn how not to get killed,
Mhm.
and that's it. They're like, here's super basics. Put the wet stuff on the hot stuff, and you're done.
Yeah,
A little bit of search and rescue, and you were done.
I mean, and to me, that's terrifying. Just
Yeah,
from being in some of the fires I have, and just having done some of the stuff, like that's a terrifying way to train because
it is.
to those who to those EMS people out there, paragods who believe that all firefighters are knuckle draggers and whatnot. First of all, yeah, we have paramedics and such on the podcast, but second of all, it's like there is a lot of finesse to structural firefighting and wildland firefighting too, for that matter, that you have to take into account. It is not just as simple as putting water on fire. You got to consider flow paths. You have to consider ventilation. You have to consider like openings in the construction
Yeah,
of
oh,
structures.
absolutely.
That's a big one that we're pushing now.
Yeah, especially like where our department's at. Most of the houses are balloon frame construction.
Mm-hmm. The house we're sitting in right now is a balloon frame construction.
Yes, it is.
But then too, you also get some of these newer houses and these allotments. lightweight wood construction that, as long as it's protected by drywall or gypsum, it's relatively well protected. But you get a basement fire, though, all those trusses, all those joists are completely unprotected, and
Yep.
they burn quick.
Absolutely.
So I couldn't imagine trying to do a level 36 fire class in today's construction.
Oh, absolutely not.
Because you just don't have the time anymore. I don't know if you ever heard this, and so one of our largest city departments, one of the battalions kept a stopwatch in their truck, and when they got a structure fire, they would start that stopwatch, and depending on what kind of house they're in, if they're in kind of the older part of the city, it was usually 30 to 40 minutes. If the fire was not out, was when they were considering, okay, do we need to go to a defensive strategy? But he said, now this is 10 years ago, back in 2013 when I did my fire too. But he said that when they went to the newer houses, so that would be the houses built in the 2000s and so on and so forth, first early age of this newer construction, he was watching it. When it started hitting that 10-minute mark, 12-minute mark, he started making the determination, do we need to pull out or not? Because if the fire's not out at that point, structural stability is being compromised quick.
Right.
But you don't learn that, and you don't learn that in the 36-hour class.
No. And I forget the actual numbers, but the houses that were built, 50, 60, 70 years ago, you had 10 minutes to safely get out. Now these new construction, you have 2.
Yeah.
Because just go up in flames. Like you said, the lightweight construction, cheaper material,
Well, not to mention the furniture we're sitting on too. This is stuff's basically petroleum gasoline we're sitting on.
Yeah.
So what do you think that actually means for the volunteer? I mean, I don't think it necessarily means that volunteers will go away entirely, but
I don't see that ever happening, because there's communities out there that can't afford to, have full-time staff, part-time staff. Their lives don't align with it. But I don't foresee that ever going away. There's in my vision, there's no way that's going to happen unless they get lots of funding that afford the staffing. There's always going to be that volunteer.
I mean, I can also see it going to the way like California has gone, or that a lot of the southern states like Alabama and South Carolina, Georgia, that kind of doing county-wide based systems. Maybe, I mean, and I realize like their fire departments down there, like in the South, aren't so much county-wide like it is out in California. However, their EMS system is county-wide, which, let's be honest, that accounts for the bulk of our calls is EMS related.
Yeah, I mean, Pennsylvania's got countywide EMS. I know what certain parts of West Virginia house countywide EMS, and there's one of you. They put you in a vehicle, everything you need, and you're responsible for everything.
Oh, I couldn't imagine that being. I'm even thinking about how big our county is. So our township by itself is 36 square miles. There is 12 townships, I think, 12 or 18 townships in our thing. They're not all 36 square miles due to actual cities and villages. But then you start thinking about that. So 36 even times 10 of those, that's 360 square miles.
A lot of miles to cover.
Huge area. Yeah. It was interesting because my father-in-law lives up in Minnesota. Their fire station covers 60 square miles of their township. I can't imagine that, because I mean it's all rural. But it already takes us where we are to get to parts of our township. It takes us 10 or 12 minutes. To get there. I couldn't imagine being somewhere where it would literally take you 25 minutes to get there.
Oh, I couldn't imagine that either.
So I mean, so what do you think what do you think it actually looks like for volunteers then?
I don't see the state of Ohio ever getting rid of the 36-hour card ever, because there's some people that's all they want to do. There's some departments that's all they require and all that they're willing to pay for as well. If they want to go higher with their training, they're gonna have to pay for that for themselves. I know some of the departments here in our county, that's all they require is a 36.
Yeah.
And honestly, sometimes it's very terrifying to know this person's only got a 36-hour training. I'm like, That's it.
Mm-hmm.
To me, I'm like, I wouldn't even. It's not worth it.
Well, and it's also too the state just decreased at least for paramedic. I haven't looked too much into fire yet, but I need to look at that.
Fire as well.
They decreased our hours we need for CE. But I guess here's the problem I think we're gonna come to is that the first of all, the legacy guys who've been doing this for 20, 30, 40 years, they're retiring faster than we can replace them.
Oh, big time.
Which makes sense. It's the boomer generation. It is the largest generation this country has ever seen. And so those holes are just being opened up faster. But my question would be, can we continue? If we continue developing even rural communities and the small suburbs and small, like boroughs, for lack of a better term, are we going to be able to maintain that kind of fire force, at least in areas close to large metropolitan areas?
Right.
Because this is, I'm sure you've seen this. We had an interesting experience a couple years ago over Thanksgiving. We got called for a service call, and just the simple fact of seeing one department in a uniform of whatever type, and then another, coming and whatever they're wearing on the farm, it makes a difference. And people are calling us, expecting us to be able to come and look like we can solve their problems and solve their problems, not just come to take up space.
Exactly. And like my full-time job, when I'm at the hospital and I see these departments that are still kind of like volunteering, like they're not staffed, and I'm like, it's like an eye opener because like I'm not used to seeing that side of the county all the time, and I'm like, these are the people that are showing up when you're having a life and death emergency, or you're just having an emergency in general. It's like, again, it's eye opening.
Yeah.
I'm coming from a very structured department, and then seeing that.
Well, it's not to say they can't give good care or they can't give good service, but it's the idea that like the world is changing, the way we do things. It's interesting to think about that. Like we have new tactics that we use now. A lot of people hate the T word, the transitional strategy, hitting the heart from the yard. I know we've brought that up before on the podcast. But that's a new strategy that has proven effective in certain situations. But if you're not abreast to that, I mean, you don't know how, maybe don't know how to use those strategies real well. Or your first inclination on a structure fire, and there's plenty of NIOSH reports to defend this, and it's almost gotten me before. I've got other guys I've worked with, it's gotten them before, and where you go barreling into a house for structure fire, well, it turns out to be a basement fire, and the floor's ready to collapse, or the floor does collapse. And, it's like, and that catches even full-time, it catches well-trained people off guard, let alone that you are given just the bare minimum to say that, I can competently put out a fire.
Right. And you brought a good point. Just because they're dressed like that too, doesn't mean they can't give good patient care.
Yeah.
They could be doing this for 10, 20 years,
Mm-hmm.
and they're coming from their regular job. And like you said earlier, a lot of the time, a lot of these people can't leave their jobs.
Yes.
Either they don't work in that city, town, or village, or township. They work way out of town. It doesn't matter as long as you get your patient care. They're respectful. And they do what they're supposed to do.
Yeah. Well, and I think that just to clarify, that's not what we're necessarily talking about. It's the challenges that they have, not just from like either a knowledge base or from a actual, from an actual training base, but just now you're bringing up the whole idea is that we do live in a world where most people don't work in the same town they live in. Yeah. At least in our area, and there's plenty of farms still out there.
Oh, yes.
But I don't know any of those farmers who are our volunteers in our immediate area. I'm sure you go down a little bit south part of the county, you get more of that. But in our area, we have a lot of farms in our area, but they're not our volunteers.
Nope.
We have a lot. We have a lot of people who insist they could do it better. We actually had one of those fire calls. I think it was last summer where the farmer insisted he could do it better. It's like, well, uh, where?
Come get an application.
Yeah, where are you? Come.
Yeah.
If you want to be a part of this, you know. Now that being said, our organization would require him to actually work part-time hours too, in addition to a farm.
Yep.
But the point is that we don't have that kind of structure anymore. You don't have the auto body shop up the street there who, if somebody's carrying a pager, they're going to let you leave in the middle painting the car and say, hey, I got to go run. They're going to look at you and say, no, that car needs painted.
Yeah.
If you're going to ruin the paint job if you don't finish it.
Yeah, I'm paying you.
Yeah, not paying you to go run fire calls.
Exactly.
So it's tough, especially whenever you go to the next city over. That's something we're struggling with too. Is that, like, at least for our department, we still depend heavily on callbacks and a volunteer kind of mindset.
Mm-hmm.
They're not necessarily volunteers anymore. However, coming in for second, third squad calls or fires, or car accidents. But now it's like you get fire, you get car accidents certain times of day. There's no one in town. There's no one in the township.
Absolutely. Yeah, and then you're relying on mutual aid.
Mm-hmm.
And it happens to everyone, including us. It just happened to us yesterday, actually. Third squad call. Had to mutual aid it.
Yeah.
It happens.
It's just real.
There's nothing wrong with it.
Well, no, it's crazy because when I started there, our call volume was barely breaking 800, and that was us kind of fluffing our calls a little bit with like all of our inspections and whatnot. Now we're breaking 1,200, almost 1,300. No sweat. No, it's all calls for service.
Yeah.
For everything. Not to mention we have a fire prevention bureau he's pretty busy, honestly. And this is over 10 years that's happened, and it's just exploded.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, you get those third calls. You get those calls that you just don't have, even if you have a good volunteer force, you don't have enough to cover it all.
Correct. Absolutely. Even when I first started, we were running 600 some calls a year.
Mm-hmm.
That was back in 2010. Here it is, 2024. We're pushing almost 1,400.
Mm-hmm.
Never did I think I would see that being here. But wow.
It's funny, when I started, one of the guys asked, young EMT firefighter too, and I was bright-eyed, bushy-tailed. I wanted a full-time job, and so he asked me, he's like, well, what do you want? Like, well, I want a full-time job. And he kind of scoffed at me and said, well, this place will never be full-time. Try again. It's like, well, okay, well, I want full-time somewhere. That was 2015-ish when we had that conversation. And what was it, 2019, 2020 was when we hired not our first like office 8-hour full-time staff. It was when we hired our first 24-hour full shift coverage staff member. And then less than a year later, we hired the next two.
Yep.
And now here we are 3 years after that, maintaining at least an A, B, and C shift.
Yep.
The entire time.
It's crazy to see how it's progressed over those 10 years, 14 years for me.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I didn't think this would ever happen.
No.
The only person I thought was going to be full time is the chief.
Yeah. And maybe assistant chief.
Yeah. And here we are.
Well, and I think it's interesting too, because like if you looked at, there's no way now we could go back to a volunteer mentality.
No.
We are too busy. We have too much going on. The expectation now when people call 911 is totally different, even than it was 5 years ago, let alone 10 or 15 years ago.
Yeah.
Because 5 years ago, we were under different we were under the same medical direction, same hospital, but different doc who had a very different expectation of us. Now our medical direction has very specific expectations that we will meet and that we need to maintain regardless of whether we are a rural department or a city department.
Yep. He expects us to do our job and utilize our tools that we use.
Yeah. Now, and it also expects us to be there for trainings to actually to further our education, not just that.
Oh, absolutely. Like our training on Tuesday.
I was going to bring that up.
You know, as an EMT basic, I am now allowed to administer epi, IM, or IN.
Mm-hmm.
Never did I think I'd see the light of day that we'd be allowed to do that.
Are you allowed to do it intranasal too?
Yeah.
That one's totally new. I mean, it's not really a complicated thing, but that one's totally new because I've only known epi, IV, IM, depending on the dose.
Yep. So I'm like, this is new. This is, I get it. The EpiPen ejectors, crazy expensive. My mom has them. She's allergic to bees. She pays like $900 for her EpiPens. I'm like, that's insane for a drug that costs $20-$30.
Yeah, that expires and that you need to live.
Mm-hmm.
Like any of our listeners who have either had to give it in the job, have a family member who has a severe allergy, it's like when you need that, you need it. It's not
absolutely. Yeah.
It's not it's like, no, it's a life or death situation.
Yeah, like my mom's severely allergic to bees.
Mm-hmm.
She gets stung. She'll stop breathing.
Well, tell her to not get stung.
I tried to. She don't listen to me ever.
Oh wow. Tell her to stop being apiary. Tell her to give up the apiary business.
So it's like I missed training last month about this. I didn't know that's what they were going over. Then they were talking about it. I'm like, since when?
Mm-hmm.
And our chief's like, oh, well, since you missed training, this is what they're talking about.
Yeah.
Like, cool. Like you said, it's a simple process. It's not hard,
No, but it's something that if you didn't go to your department's training, excuse me, that's not something that you're going to get on the online CE.
Right.
That's not something like if there's no CE I'm going to find right now, except for maybe something very particular out west, Montana, Utah, for like wildlands, like search and rescue type stuff. Like my National Park Service might talk about it. But that's not something that any CE is ever going to teach you about because that's brand new to a protocol for an EMT in general.
Oh, absolutely.
That's like EMTs are like very hands off doing anything. So
yeah, some of them are like, I'm uncomfy. I ain't doing this.
Yeah.
But there might be a situation you have to do that.
Mm-hmm. Like
there's no choice.
Yeah. No, and if you don't have a structure, if you don't have like if you're sitting in a realm where as a volunteer it's like, hey, I can't make it to department trainings, or if I can't, you miss those really important things to change.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I was glad I was there for that because it was informative. Two, I enjoyed it.
Mm-hmm.
Something new, that I did not expect that a basic would be ever allowed to do.
I'm glad they're expanding out your protocols and your abilities just a little bit because there's no reason, and there are risks.
Absolutely.
There are absolute risks, but there's no reason why we can't expand out your roles a little bit. But that's also what comes with being a part of a professional organization, part of being professional, like an actual professional job spec, not just doing this for.
Yep. I remember going through the Narcan training when, heroin out here was huge. Yeah, pretty easy. It's simple.
Mm-hmm. So what do you think, besides, going to the, besides responding to calls, because obviously in today's economy, that's a little more difficult for jobs to let you run off and respond to them, and the fact that just we're just getting too busy. What are some of the bigger problems we have now with volunteers, and not including training either, because we could talk to death about how training could be better, but it could be better across the whole board for everyone.
Oh, agreed. See, people don't want to put the time in.
Mm-hmm.
People, people got families. Yeah, money. That's probably the number one right there. And then there's a lot of people that just don't want to put the time into it.
Yeah. Well, it's hard, and anyone who's ever been part of a volunteer organization of any type, whether it's an association, whether it's a conglomerate of people who like go pick up trash around their community, or knows that as volunteers, you cannot necessarily force people
Correct.
to, unless you're necessarily paying them, and then you have a little bit more leverage. But even then, if they're volunteers, and you just compensate them for the time that they give, you can't necessarily force them to give more.
Oh, absolutely. And like you say, you can't force them. And again, if they're going to get paid for something, then they have some leeway. Like, hey, you have to be here. We're paying you to be here, so let's be here. Or you're just a straight volunteer. Hey, I ain't coming. I'm not getting paid for this, or I'm not getting compensated for any of this. Why would I show up? You know?
Yeah, no, it's well, and then too, everything that you have to do for them costs money. So I was looking at our local fire school to kind of, because there's a couple trainings I want to do down there, just to rent and use some of their spaces. It's not exorbitant. Don't get me wrong, but for for what it is, because it's not just renting the space. You then also have to rent the instructors who are qualified to operate that space. You have to have somebody who is on their insurance, who, like, so say you want to use their classroom. Well, that's cool. You can use their classroom building, but we need to have somebody there who's in charge of the building from our organization.
Yep.
And so now you have to pay for a rental classroom. Now you got to pay for their whatever their time is, whatever their fee is. If you want to do something like the rappel tower or the burn building, now whatever the cost is for the rental of we'll use rappel towers easier. So the cost of that, plus all the wavering that you have to do for use of that, plus having not only your own instructors on staff who can teach and who are a part of that, but also their instructors who are actually specifically trained in that. It gets expensive quick.
Oh, I can only imagine how much it costs. Like, I've never looked into it. Like, I know I've looked into the flashover trailer that State Fire Academy provides. It's like $9,900 a burn. I'm like, and that's crazy expensive.
Now, is that burn as in per day, or like every time that you light it up?
Every time they light it up.
So in other words, so let's just say, and I'm imagining it's a 53-foot trailer, give or take. So based on that, you probably get 10 to 15 personnel in there, plus 2 instructors at the front, 1 in the back. So you're probably maxed out 18 people in there. If you have a department of, say, 36, which is about the size of our department with all of our part-timers and full-timers included, $900 per light up. So, and also depending on your ratio of student to instructor, so you might only get maybe 12 students in there. You're up to 3 times you're lighting that thing up before you've even paid your staff to be there, before you've even paid for them to be there, before you pay, you're already up to $3,600.
Oh,
or not $2,700 just for that. And then you have to contend with, well, what if we only get half our department to come, and now we want to do it another day so we can get the other half of the department to come.
Yep.
And now you're basically doubling all that.
Yeah, you're close to $10,000.
Yeah.
It's expensive.
Yeah. And I could see like that being a really difficult thing for some of these organizations who they depend on volunteers, because it's cheaper for the moment, but then to like maintain it can become a challenge.
And then those departments that can get those houses and to burn, some of those places, I don't know what their regulations are, but I know for us, we have to take everything off, including the shingles, just to burn these houses. So it's very rare that we get those.
That's pretty standard across the country now for EPA. Anything plastic has to come out, wiring has to come out, shingles, because it's got tar and asphalt, it has to come off. And then whenever you do, and so if you ever do your fire instructor, you'll go over the 1403 awareness before, because you have the 1403 is its own class. But you'll go through about 6 or 8 NIOSH reports of failures in these burns. And like when it comes to burning an actual house, you're really only good for maybe two or 3 burns before you got let go. Right. And it gets dangerous quick, because in a real house, just like a real structure fire, you can't necessarily control where that fire goes when it's all said and done. Like, you have no control over that whatsoever.
Yeah, like I've been to some burns that they didn't do anything. They just left it the way it was.
Mm-hmm.
Back in my mind, it's like I thought this place had to be gutted. You know?
Yeah. Now, and there's I mean, there's always going to be those times where somebody takes, like, for lack of a better term, takes advantage of those occurrences and
Mhm.
whatnot. But yeah, no, it's a process, and then that's only just the process. So your department has to pay for that, unless you're lucky enough to find a contractor who will do it out of the graciousness of their heart.
Mhm.
So dumpster fees plus labor fees plus
Yeah.
if you're gonna throw, you have to get rid of certain things like insulation, or if you get a house that has asbestos or anything
Oh,
like that.
yeah.
First of all, you might as well just like turn around, walk away, and ignore it.
Mhm.
But like that gets expensive. Not to mention the actual application fees and then the time it takes, because it
Yeah.
takes on average anywhere from 6 to 9 months between communicating with your local EPA office and getting all that done before you're actually able to do a live
Yeah. I remember the one time we did a live burn. We didn't pay for anybody to come out. We went out as a department and tore the house apart ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the only thing we had to pay for was the dumpster. Our chief at the time knew how to run heavy machinery, which was nice and shocking at the same time. But, you know, it was a good training.
Yeah.
That's for sure. But I was still young. I was like, I didn't realize we had to take all this off to be compliant. So it's like, it's eye opening too.
Well, and so now you brought up something actually interesting, because this almost came and got us without going into the into really deep into the weeds on this. Volunteer departments, and there's a lot of departments across the country who still use somewhat of a mentality of this. I work for a full time department, we still do this, but those firefighters, those members are largely responsible for the care and maintenance of everything,
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
and that's and now we're getting into a realm where it's, first of all, none of us are necessarily handymen. I mean, some of us are just because we've gotten a little bit of exposure to it, but especially this younger generation, it's, if I told some of our younger guys, hey, I need you to go replace an electrical outlet, first of all, they're gonna be smart and go look at YouTube. But second of all, if they couldn't, it would be fun. It'd be a one-time funny trick
Yes.
they would do. But
Absolutely.
there'd be a little zap and owl and a cursing.
Oh yeah.
And it's like, I mean, in a volunteer world, you don't have like tons of funds to just throw
No,
at
you don't.
apparatus, equipment, personnel, and maintenance of like facilities. Like,
Yeah, it costs money.
Mhm.
You know, like you said, maintenance of facilities, vehicles, e- the equipment, fuel costs.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that money's coming from somewhere, and they may have a smaller budget than some of these other departments.
Yeah.
You know, like look at the bigger departments in the country, like L.A., New York,
Mm-hmm.
Tampa. They have, you can only imagine what their operating budget is to begin with,
Mhm.
millions. Then you got these little volunteer departments that may have a operating budget of 50,000 or less.
So we were just talking about this the other night. The average across in the United States, the average a department will spend is somewhere about around the 80, like 85-ish, like 87 to 82% is what the department will spend just for personnel and payroll alone.
Mhm.
So let's just make it easy. So $100,000 you have going in, or for your budget, total budget. We're not going to break it down with operational versus capital budget. We're not getting into those weeds. But you have $100,000 to spend there. That means actually, when it's all said and done, after you pay all your people, you have about $15,000 left for maintenance of your trucks, maintenance of your facilities, maintenance of your equipment, any improvements you need to make, all the other stuff, fire gear and all that is now, that's what you have left over.
Absolutely.
It's not a lot.
No, it's not.
Not to mention just like even smaller organizations. You said $50,000. Now we're talking $7,000, $8,000 to
Yeah.
mess with.
Yeah, I mean, look at some of these departments. They still use the siren.
Mm-hmm.
to alert people. Years ago, when I was out by Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, that's what they used.
Mm-hmm.
Siren. I'm like, wow. I've been doing this for some time now. Never been anywhere. I've heard them use a siren
Mm-hmm.
to alert personnel.
We actually had our full time our mechanic had just from our old one of our old stations had just taken down the fire siren for it, and that was giving them crap because it's I know it was from when their volunteer days of when they used to use it because it looks like an old civil defense siren,
Mm-hmm.
and they probably could have used it for either or honestly, but that's not really that long of a bygone era. That
No.
was there's a place up north of us here that still uses it. And then down south by where I work full time, there's departments down there that still use a fire siren to alert their personnel.
Yeah, like when I was living down in Southern Ohio, some of the departments out there
Mhm.
were all volunteer,
Mm-hmm.
And that's what they used. And then being down there, coming from up here, it's like, wow, it's a whole new world.
Could you imagine just hearing the siren? You have no idea whether you're going for a EMS call, a odor investigation, or a structure fire,
Right.
but you just know a call,
Yeah, you're getting some kind of call.
arbitrary call has come in. And
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine just
I don't like that unknown.
no. We already have too much of that as it is.
Oh, absolutely. Like anything can happen on any call regardless, but not knowing whatever the call is, like, okay, now what's this call for? What vehicle do I take?
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Mm-hmm.
I just don't like not knowing.
No. Well, and I think that's the one thing, and I never really. There's one or two times I think I ever had the unknown where I was asking while walking up to the scene, what the hell are we doing here? Like, and then not like what are we doing here? So we're wasting time, but it's like, well, what are we here for? And it was back during some of the volunteer days, and one of them was because it happened in my apartment allotment that I lived in, and we were going for a call at one of the neighboring apartments. And another one was because it didn't our reporting system we have on our phones didn't show anything. It just said EMS call,
Mm-hmm.
and so I was like, oh, okay, cool. You arrive on scene. Hey, I came to help. What's going on?
Yeah.
And so I never really experienced that as like arriving on scene, but I know many other people did where they just see like full arrest come across and they just go, not knowing whether it's drug related, whether it's, elderly, trauma, whatever. They just saw full arrest. They have no idea what they're walking into, but they just flock there with their vehicles.
Oh, absolutely. And like when I first started, that's how it was.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the part timers were only there 8 to 4. That's it. And then throughout the day, you get a call. You're just getting called for an all call to address. Sometimes they told you what it was for. Sometimes they didn't. You won't know till you show up.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, what am I about to walk into?
Mm-hmm. No, and the only ones who really knew are either the ones at the station or the ones who had pagers because nothing else got communicated elsewhere. Well, and that created its own problems. I remember one. This is before you came back. It was right after I became a paramedic. We were running a full arrest, and and we went to a call, and because everyone saw full arrest, everybody and their brother came to help. Now, I'm not going to go too deep in the weeds here, but it is sometimes helpful to have a couple extra hands on full arrest. However, when it's all said and done, once I hit the point of about 4 or 5 people, I want to get rid of people. I don't want anyone else coming because you're not helping. You're getting in the way.
Oh, absolutely agreed.
To be perfectly honest and nice about it. But that's what happened here was that every time I looked up, it was kind of comical in a way. But every time I looked up, there's a new person standing there asking, "What can I do?"
Yep.
And at first, it's me and the other part timer, and then I look up. Oh, there's the EMS captain. Okay, cool. I look up. There's the chief. Okay, I look up. There's two other people standing. Where are you coming from? Are you gnomes? Are you dwarves coming out of the ground?
Like they come out of the woodwork. It's like you'll get a full arrest. The next thing you know, you got 10 people standing there. I remember one year we took 6 people to the hospital for a full arrest. Like, why?
Yeah, and then in the back of the ambulance, you can't move because you're bumping into someone, elbowing someone, punching someone in the face.
Elbows to elbows in there. Like, why?
I remember this one, and I remember this one. It caused 2 problems. Number one, it caused communication issues because we had people everywhere. We had people out in the ambulance waiting for us to come in, and we had people inside the house, and we can't telepathically communicate with each other. So a person out in the ambulance is trying to restart the code because that's the first time they're seeing the patient. Meanwhile, in the house, we've already been working it for 12 minutes. We're ready. We're coming out of ready to go to the hospital because we just got ROSC and we're ready to roll out. So that was the first problem. The second problem is then that it's like now you gotta move everybody because people don't when they came, they didn't like park in the way to like so the bus could get out and go where it had to go. They parked wherever they could find space, and if that was blocking the squad, well, sorry for your luck. And it's just like, oh my, I will never forget that. It was just the biggest thing was like, what's going on here? Like, why?
Yeah, and I remember. I don't remember exactly what year it was, but I remember our chief at the time saying, "Listen, if you get 2 people on a full arrest, that's it. Everybody else can go home. We don't need that many." Which he was right. We don't need 6 to 10 people there.
No,
we need a driver and at least only 2 in the back.
It's especially with the advent
maybe 3
of
before the the Lucas and the
auto
pulses came out.
Yes,
3
with the advent of your AMA's CPR devices. That was a game changer.
Oh, 100% it was.
Which, maybe on a little bit more positive side, things like that have helped volunteer agencies immensely. If you as a volunteer agency can get your hands on a couple of either Lucas or Autopulse devices or whatever other devices, we're not sponsored by anyone. We don't care what you use. That's a game changer.
It is
when it comes to CPR.
Absolutely. It's whoever invented that and came up with that, genius. It is
all the coin.
Literally, yeah. Like, this is the greatest thing since sliced bread, in my opinion. One, now you're not sweating and dripping all over. You get them set up, and then it does it for you. You don't have to count. It does it for you.
Yeah. No, and it's so consistent. So we in a full-time department a couple years ago when we were doing our CPR refresher, we were lucky enough for our vendor to bring in he brought in the meter. The basic it looks like an EKG except it shows like the consistency of your compressions versus like what is like optimal and whatnot. And the device we used was, I mean, of course, because it's engineered perfect on the dot. 100 compressions per minute, perfect depth, perfect across the board and whatnot. And then you look at when you look at like provider CPR, and there's just such a range of anywhere from like 65% effective to 100% effective to, this might sound good, but it's actually bad, to 105% effective, where you're going too fast or too deep or too much, which is just as bad as being ineffective with it.
And I've been guilty. I've done it too fast and too much. I've been guilty of it.
Yeah, no, that's been a game changer, and honestly, that's been something that if you have a volunteer agency and you can become effective with things like that, that's. I mean, some of the other things all the reporting software that's out there. So everything doesn't have to be handwritten now. It can be digitally captured and digitally stored. And then you can also have even third parties like look it over and make sure and do all your billing stuff for you. That's a huge thing
Yeah,
too.
I remember starting when we still did paper reports, and then switching to electronic. I'm like, I just got comfortable writing paper reports, not gonna switch over to
Mhm.
electronic. You know?
Every once in a while, you got to do a paper report just to show young kids how much
Yeah,
easier it was,
you have
and
the report done
yeah,
2 minutes down the road.
until you have to put it back into the computer when you get back to the station, and then you
Sure.
and then you groan. But
Yep.
no, things like that, that has definitely helped the volunteer spec. But then too, I mean, just so much. I just wonder how long or how is it going to look here in even the next 10 years with
Yeah.
with the changes in just society, changes in our demographics.
Oh yeah.
Because one thing we kind of touched on earlier, but I guess now's as good a time to really dive into it. People are moving out of larger cities
Yes.
into our areas, and they expect two things. Well, I guess three things when it's all said and done. They expect fire EMS services at the beck and call. They expect police services
Yep.
at their beck and call, and they expect utility services at their beck and call.
Absolutely.
And that's gonna be hard for a volunteer service to provide because you go from a city. Now I realize larger cities, you get backed up in calls just like anywhere else, but you call 911, you generally know somebody within the next 10 minutes is arriving at your doorstep, knocking on your door to fix your problem.
Yep.
Some of these areas here, he's like, you call 911, you're waiting 10 minutes just for people to fully assemble and get rolling,
Oh yeah.
let alone for them to arrive at your
Yeah.
doorstep.
Sometimes let's just say 15, 20 minutes by the time they're at your door.
Yeah.
And like I said earlier, there's some departments they have to go to a second tone out,
Mm-hmm.
and then there's nobody responding to that call. Now we have to call the next city that's going to be able to handle that call for them.
Yeah.
And that's the reality at times too.
Well, and there's many times with one of our neighboring departments where whenever they were in a different spot, I'm not sure how it's going to work now, but like we would get them as an auto aid and we would just cancel them
Yeah.
because it's like, by the time our dispatch is calling us back and say, hey, we've got no response from them, we're already halfway there. You know what?
Mhm.
Just don't worry about
Yeah,
it.
just
It's
go ahead and
okay.
cancel 'em. Yeah.
It's fine. But if we weren't able to respond and they got no response, and let's just say, I mean, for your average thing, okay, my leg hurts or abdominal pain, which I mean, those could be bad things too. But even in those benign situations, it's bad. What about, hey, shortness of breath? What about your chest pains? What about, hey, I have a STEMI? You're already behind the eight ball because they've probably been feeling those pains for like your last 4 or 5 hours, hoping they go
Yeah.
away. Not to mention now you're delaying that care even more. Not to mention that when you arrive, you have anyone who can start initial EMS care
Right.
going. I mean, it starts taking a toll real quick.
Oh, absolutely. Like one of our neighboring departments, like sometimes they're so right now they're relying on all these other departments to run their calls because
Mhm.
they can barely get anybody.
Yeah.
And it's like this is gonna be bad, and it is bad,
Mhm.
and it's only gonna get worse until things change for them. Because they were once staffed, now they're back to a volunteer department.
Mhm.
They kind of went backwards in that situation, but it's like,
Well, when you run sub 500 calls a
Yeah.
year and a small area, yeah, it's not as big, but when the big stuff does happen, you're stuck.
Yeah.
You don't, because here's the thing, because it's interesting you bring it up. So they rely on neighboring departments to kind of pick up some of the slack on it.
Mhm.
Those neighboring departments. So I work with people from those other neighboring departments, and they're not always the busiest in
Right.
the world, but they are busier.
Mhm.
It's kind of like saying, it's kind of like, I'm trying to think of a really good example here. It's like, okay, so you have like you have work that you need to do around your house, and you're waiting on your buddy, and you're depending on your buddy to come help you do that stuff. Well, your buddy also works a full-time job during daytime hours.
Yeah.
So they're not always available
Right.
every single moment, Not to mention, hey, your buddy has kids. So guess what? They got to go take care of all that stuff too.
Yep.
Oh, hey, your buddy's also, his mom's also, not doing well. And so now he's got to go take care of that. So now you're dependent on this. And now you're kind of at the mercy of, I can't do these things myself.
Yeah.
I need everyone else to do it, but everyone else has got their own stuff they got to do. And maybe they're not the busiest people in the world, but that doesn't mean that they're available on your timeline.
Yeah. Like when I first started, I wasn't always available.
Oh.
There's times like I came from like 20 minutes away just because they needed help. But again, there was times I just can't do it. Can't do it today. I got stuff going on. You got to take care of this. You got to take care of that.
Mm-hmm.
And it happens.
Well, we talked about this in the previous podcast, like 5 years ago. But we talked about this, that your time too, your like rest time and your break time, that's your time too. So I can't fault some of these guys, especially ones who let's give benefit of the doubt. Like, okay, so your volunteers also are firefighters, paramedics, EMTs, and larger organizations. So they're doing this out of the graciousness of their heart to serve their community, and their off time. Well, that's their time off, So if they want to plan family events and they want to go place, you can't look at them and say, "Oh no, you can't do that." It's like, no, they still have their lives to live. So you gotta take that time, because you can't just be pager chasing the entire time.
That's a good way to burn yourself out too. And I've been there before. It's happened. Like, I gotta take a break. Not for me for about a month, because it has happened.
Yeah,
I hate that feeling, but it does happen.
It does, and it's amazing because in the career spec, it's like the most jarring thing. What do you mean you can't respond? What do you mean you need a break? In the volunteer spec, where it's almost a necessity, you also got to give those people a break. Let alone, we all have different gauges of, and I'll just touch on this for a second, but we all have different gauges of what is traumatizing to us. But you have a bad call, a bad pediatric call, or really bad fatal accident or something like that, or fatal fire or whatever. It's like, that person's going to need time, however much time they need. They might never come back.
Oh, yeah.
But they're going to need that time to decompress,
Yeah. I know someone personally that had happened to, and they have left the service completely because of it.
And it's sad because I think I know exactly who you're talking about. And it's sad because, man, that's a brother who's gone. Who's, they went on to other things, and good for them, but it's like, that's still, But when it came down to it, the support system that they needed wasn't there, because the response was, well, so you could still respond to calls, right? Well, you could still. It's like, no, I need a break.
Yeah.
No, I need to step back from this. It
absolutely
was really, that was traumatizing.
Yeah, and some people are like, "Oh, just suck it up. This is what you do for your job or for your living. You should be used to this." You're not always used to this stuff, especially when it comes to children. That's totally different.
Well, and you bring up something interesting. So yeah, we do kind of get a little bit of a calloused heart when it comes to when we do this routinely every third day. I mean, you do kind of develop some resilience to it. But so your organization runs, say, 300, 400 calls a year, which means maybe you're getting 15 of those a year in your volunteer state. You get a really bad one. That's not like a hiccup, like, okay, hey, I need to take a couple of days and decompress. No, that could be absolutely earth shattering.
Oh, absolutely.
Because you have you have no frame of reference. It's like I remember when I first started, and we brought up this kind of stuff too. Like, how cool it was to get the really cool fires, really cool accidents and whatnot. I can't imagine now looking back on that 10 years in some of the accidents you go on and some of the stuff that happens and you see that all the time, you're kind of used to it. It's not necessarily healthy to see it, but you're kind of used to it.
Yeah.
But so let's just say mid 20-year-olds guy who's seen that for the first time in 8 years, who the worst they have seen is grandma complaining that their foot hurts because the cat like scratched them or something like that. And now this is the call that like they actually see like remains like separated from the body or like that's jarring. That's not like a normal thing to see.
No, it's not normal at all. And unfortunately, that's what we have to deal with in this too, And like you said, place that runs 500-600 calls a year, and they might make 15 or 20 of those calls.
Mm-hmm.
And they see something like that could be it for them. They're done.
Yeah. Yeah. And now you're even more,
Now you're more like one person less to cover calls.
Yeah. Not to mention all the things that comes, all the baggage that comes with that, because this is the one thing, and every organization is different. Every organization is going to say, "Oh, we are perfect at this. We do a really good job of this." I promise you, there's someone there who doesn't feel included and doesn't feel like they have anyone to go talk to about it.
Right.
And that could be devastating in multiple ways.
Oh, absolutely. And I know that's one of our subjects that we'll talk about, is PTSD.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to be a huge one when we get to that topic.
Yeah. No, that's one of those I actually want to bring a guest speaker in. So because that's like one of those really, really deep ones.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I mean, from that aspect, like trying to deal with that and trying to in the volunteer mindset, that's tough.
Mm-hmm.
Especially a lot of these volunteer departments that you go there and there's no one there during the daytime. Maybe a fire chief part-time. But otherwise, if you call to that building at any given time during the day, you got about a 50-50 shot of actually getting a hold of someone.
Oh, absolutely. And it also depends on where you're at, what if they can have somebody there. People might just be hanging out there.
Yeah.
It's like you said, it's 50-50.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to get someone or you're not.
Yeah. Yeah, no. So I think maybe this would be a good place, not so deep and dark to land on, but the last thing, and this is something we still struggle with because our volunteer days aren't that far behind our rear view mirror, is care of the equipment. Like one of the struggles, like especially with like not only state audits, but also like the advent of like digital era for maintaining equipment. That's putting a real
ringer there.
Yeah, like you're tightening the screws on that because like once upon a time, like, and I know this was one of the issues we had when we went to our electric extrication tools. A gas powered engine generally starts out the first time you pull the cord. Those electric tools, I couldn't imagine for some of these agencies who they don't have anyone, they have electric tools. If you don't check those batteries or if you don't swap them out.
Yeah, especially if you don't get a call for 2 or 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody's got to be there to maintain that.
Yeah.
And they don't. And you get an NVA and there's entrapment. Oh, the batteries are dead. Now what?
Yeah. And now you're grumbling because you wish you kept kept the old power plant system that.
Yeah.
Yeah. No.
Like what we had years ago. We had the hydraulic tools with the portable generator.
Mm-hmm.
That was a blast from the past.
It was. Now it had its own quirks, but then also too, you also had to have somebody who maintained that too. Because here's the thing that we ran into a lot was when equipment broke, and we still kind of run into this a little bit. But what happens to it? And 9 out of 10 times it gets put off to the side somewhere, forgotten about until the next time it's needed, and then either A, it's missing, it's broken, or somebody just discovers it.
Yep.
And that's like, now what we do about it? And yeah, I can't imagine trying to, especially the digital age, trying to maintain that stuff
Yeah.
in the volunteer world. That's a completely different.
I mean, yeah, like you said, I can only imagine too. And for me, it's almost for my sanity,
Mhm.
I'd do it by hand.
Yeah.
Just because I know where it's at.
Mm-hmm.
I know it's been put in. Especially if you barely run any calls.
Yeah.
You know, and like we're good about if there's an apparatus broken or piece of equipment, we send out a page. Hey, this has been removed from this
Mm-hmm.
apparatus because of this.
Yes.
And it's like now you don't have you open a door like, hey, where's the saw?
Yeah, I couldn't imagine you get a. I mean, we use a car accident. Let's just say that you get a Did, so it's kind of a exposing story. So one of my first things I did on one of the trainings was I bent a Halligan, a forged Halligan, because I was using it improperly. Me and another guy, we were using it improperly. We were trying to pop a door with it on it. We were doing a junkyard training thing. We bent the Halligan. It wouldn't fit back in the thing. Halligan is kind of a necessary thing for forcing the door.
Yeah.
I don't care how you split it. That's kind of a necessary tool for forcing doors. That had to be removed from the engine. In a volunteer world, you remove the Halligan from the engine, half your irons, half your toolkit for forcing doors. No one knows it. They go to a structure fire at 2:30 in the morning.
Yep.
You know, house is locked up because family's upstairs snoozing. They don't realize, and you don't have a Halligan. And there's no one who told you that it's missing. There's no way to communicate it was missing. And the time you're discovering it is at 2:30 in the morning when you're tired, pissed off, and annoyed. And that's bad. That's
Absolutely
not good.
It's not. I couldn't imagine what I would do if I found something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I'd be pissed.
Mm-hmm.
I really would. Yeah. And someone knew about it. It didn't say anything.
Mm-hmm. Well, and going into like squad checks and whatnot, like whenever you come in, this happens even at full-time departments where it's like, hey, they had a busy night, they didn't get everything put away or everything replaced. You get that right as shift change, that next squad call goes out. Go turn the monitor, monitor's dead. You go to, you go to grab the glucometer because hey, they're unconscious and they're diabetic. There's no glucometer strips or no lancets. Like that's not like a whoopsie. That's a I can't do my job. And then on the volunteer space, that like, hey, that might have been that way for days or weeks because whoever it was who was the last to have run that call.
Absolutely.
Yeah, let's be honest. They have one thing. Hey, get the call wrapped up. I want to go back home. I want to go back to, whatever it was I was doing before this.
And there are some volunteer departments that take more pride
Mm-hmm.
than others too. I mean, look, I'm sure you've heard of Kentland. Yeah, they're full-time volunteer department. You live in the station. Yeah, I think is crazy insane. But you got them, and then you got some of these very rural departments across the country that don't do that. Yeah, they're coming from home. They're living in the station. Mm-hmm. This volunteer department might run 2,000 calls a year. Mm-hmm. This one's running 200 a year. Yeah. This department that runs their 200 calls a year can probably take way more pride and take care of their stuff over this full-time volunteer department. It's black and white, two different worlds. Yeah.
And we're not saying that Kentland doesn't or does or doesn't. We're just using as an example that it could. That's how it could be. Mm-hmm. But no, you could take a lot of pride, or you could like, hey, we got crops to burn. We got things. We got other things. Hey, you might be in the middle of harvest, and this, I mean, it's not a tight window, but it's a tight enough window during harvest time. Yeah, you gotta get your crops in before the frost sets in. And if you don't, that's loss of your family's revenue there.
Oh, absolutely.
So, I mean, yeah.
And that could be either having cattle that's going to survive the winter, cattle that's not, too.
Yeah. Or like, oh hey, so like let's just say that like take away from the farmland farming aspect. So let's say you own like a contracting company, you do like concrete or asphalt. Well, asphalt, I don't know exactly what the temperature is. I think it's around 38 degrees or 40 degrees, something like that. Somewhere in there, anything lower, you can't pour asphalt. It won't set up correctly.
Nope.
Which means that in Ohio, come about October, November, nights are getting cold. You know, days are getting cold.
Yep.
You got X number of jobs left, and you're trying to do it. You're the foreman of the job site or your worker. You go as a volunteer. You go respond to a call, but your thought is, hey, my company, I gotta get back to make sure that this is getting done because, hey, in about 2 weeks we're done.
Yeah,
everything's over.
And you make a good point there because in the middle of harvest, it's getting that time of year. You got to get this, get the crop out of the field and into silos or out, to the company.
Yeah.
Hey, I go on this call. It's going to take me 3, 4, maybe 5 hours for this call. I could have this field done in 4 to 5 hours.
Yeah.
You gotta think of stuff like that too.
Well, it's interesting because I was listening to another podcast, and I'm by no means an expert at all in this. We have a nice little garden; it does well, but that's about it. But I think for gardening purposes, and learning like how actual larger farms do it, there's really only about 2 months in the dead of winter. It's like February to like Marchish, January, February, somewhere in there. Whereas the coldest of cold, where that is your true off time. Every other part of the year, you are doing something for your farm to prepare the fields, or to take care of the fields, or to close the fields out and get them ready for next season.
Yeah, and I've already started to see that happening too. They're out there turning the fields, plowing. I've also seen some farmers that's put fertilizer down.
I was gonna say I saw lime and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, the lime. Yep.
They put out some of the ones as like, it's getting to that frosting
already. Yeah.
Well, it's so if that's your livelihood and that's your family's like return. I mean, losing 5 hours in a day for a fire or accident, or losing a few hours to do a EMS transport,
feeding and taking care of your family or not.
Yeah.
And I can only imagine what kind of decisions they would have to make. Like, hey, sorry, I have to get this done.
Yeah.
I can't go on this call. Like, this has to be done. I have to get this done.
Yeah. No.
Especially like those guys that might be farmers out in the West that are on rural fire departments.
Yeah.
Some of those guys got huge farms.
Yeah, we call a couple hundred acres as decently sized, but there's some farms out there, 1,000, 2,000 acre ranches that just that is their 100% their livelihood beyond.
Oh, absolutely.
That's a livelihood for them and several other families that they can't let go.
Yeah, it's like either I stop and run this call, or I continue to do my harvest. Do I make money and feed my family, or do I go to do this?
Yeah,
I can only that'd be a hard choice, but I don't know what I would do. I can't say I would know what I'd do.
I can't either, but I can say that it definitely puts a squeeze, especially with my wife and I were talking about this today when we were talking about getting apples. That the times when our harvest is, and I feel like we've kind of diverted here just a little bit, but I promise it works out. But our harvest season is in a certain time versus the southern hemisphere. Like in the way the world economy works, like you don't really get an option to say no. And I can't imagine for volunteer service that, hey, you're part of the world economy, whether you want to be a part of it or not. You're exporting to some degree somewhere. Most farms are not just supplying their local farmers market; they are sending elsewhere. You go to Walmart, you go to Sam's Club, you go to Giant Eagle or wherever. They have signs somewhere that says source locally from whichever farm.
Yeah,
it's they are. It's not just like a immediate area. They're branching out, and that's and from a volunteer mindset, like you can't pull away from that either anymore.
Nope.
Like maybe 40 years ago you could because your farmers market and your neighbors and whatnot and general stores where you're selling most of your stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's part of the whole thing. You can't,
especially when your crop is a all year round crop.
Yeah.
Too. There's just you're always doing something.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's like was it the dairy down here just south of us that you can always smell every spring. It's I wonder like, what do you like? I'm used to farm smell. Don't get me wrong, but that's like you feed your cow something. I don't know what, but like that's 24 hours. That's not like
absolutely.
They don't shut down. They don't. There is no rest time. It is sun up to sundown. Something is going on there.
Yeah, dairy farming is 24/7 business. There is no off time for that one.
Yeah. So now, you take those guys and like even you have a staff of, like 30 or 40 who are going back and forth, but you take like 4 or 5 of them who are for your local departments to go off and run. Like that's okay. So now you lost like 10% of your staff.
Yeah.
20% of your staff just to go run for several hours in a day.
You brought up a really good example. Years ago when we were still mostly volunteer, when we would go out and do things as a group, there's 50% of your department out doing things.
Mm-hmm.
You get a call. There's maybe 1 or 2 people coming back at that point.
Yeah.
It's gonna happen.
Yeah. Especially if you're a volunteer department, you got 50% of your like bring up like the training. Hey, you go down to your local training center that's like 20 or 30 miles away. Yeah. Who's left to cover the area?
Exactly. And they can't expect you to always stay around for a call. You have your own life too.
Yeah.
Like, hey, you're gonna go out. You're gonna have fun. You're gonna enjoy your life. You're not gonna be tied down just right there.
Yeah.
And you have to. I remember getting yelled at years ago because we were out and about. Well, where were you guys at? We needed you. Where was our structure fire? We had to call mutual aid for primary. Sorry, but I'm not sorry at the same time.
I'm on my personal time. Yeah. I was the next city away.
Mm-hmm. And I can't come. I've been drinking.
Yeah.
I get hurt. That's even worse.
That's a big thing.
Yeah.
I remember we made a joke a couple years ago. We were over having a bonfire at someone's house and we're like joke was like, if we get a structure fire, none of us can go.
Right.
We're not just like, okay, kind of sip it. No, we are gone. Well, I guess that's not our problem though. Like that's not our thing to deal with because we needed that camaraderie to do.
Absolutely. And you still do.
Yes. But at some point you have to realize it's one of my favorite things our chief jokes about is whenever they go over to the next town over, it's like, oh, we're probably going to drop a structure fire or something because I'm going over shopping over next door.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, yeah, you're leaving 2 of us here for 2 hours. The world's about to fall apart.
Yeah. I remember going over to their house. Usually something crazy would happen.
Mm.
Here's 90% of people that's going to respond to that call.
Yep.
And nobody can leave.
Yep. And even if they could leave, like you're still like 5-10 minutes away from the station, let alone getting to that call. So.
Yeah. And usually in that group, there's always that one person that was on call that night too. And that's the only one in the group that's going to that call.
Yep.
And where was everybody? We weren't around.
Yeah,
Sorry.
we're there.
But we just can't be there.
Yeah. No, it's hard because especially just from a global standpoint, the world's population has something like tripled since the 80s or since the 40s, something like that. It's something like it's grown a lot, which means there's a lot more need for it.
Mm-hmm.
But then also too, you still got the rest of the world to take on too.
Oh, absolutely.
So now, as we kind of landed on earlier, I don't think the volunteerism will ever fully go away. But I think that what we see it as now is going to largely disappear. Whether it's by the fact that there'll be new training requirements state by state or federally that come down that they have to meet, or if there's like just new ways of conducting business with today's world, it's going to change, and maybe in a sense we'll see the death of volunteerism as to what it is now. But I mean, I don't know. It's got to be tough. It's got to be.
Oh, it does. Again, I remember when we were still somewhat of a volunteer department. It was tough then too.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's got their own jobs, their own lives. But at that time too, a lot of people were able to leave those jobs.
Yeah.
When they worked close to town or in town. Can't do that anymore.
No.
Employers like, hey, go ahead, you leave. You're gonna better find another job.
Yeah. No, that's. Yeah.
But then there's some of those jobs like, oh, I know you're on the fire department. If you get a call, you can go. You don't find that much anymore, especially in this area. I know some places down in the southern parts of the township that their employers will let them do that.
Yeah.
If they work in town. But very rarely will your boss like, yeah, you leave. You're gonna leave for good.
You're not leaving your job at Walmart or your job at AutoZone to go do that. Generally, that's So maybe this will be a good place to land on. Then here we're probably about an hour 10, hour 15 minutes here. Be a good place to land on. What would be, from your time as a volunteer, my time as a volunteer, what would be some of your, like, I guess, suggestions to the young members who are like, maybe that's all they can do, or they're trying to break into the fire service that way? Like, what would be like one or two of your like gems or pearls?
So, depending on where you live too, don't take the minimum training. Take either the middle or the high road.
Yeah.
Because you take the minimum, you're just going to learn super basics. It's like first aid for fire.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want that. And I'm sure the people you respond to their house fire wouldn't want that either. They want you to be able to have quite a bit of knowledge. Take what you can. And if you can only take like that minimum level course, that's okay. Take it, get some experience, maybe find someone or you pay for the next level up and continue. But just don't be hard on yourself either, because it's going to take time. It's years of experience. I mean, like I said, I'm doing this 13 and 14 years, and we're still learning about this stuff.
Yeah.
And, we got the highest level of training here. It's evolving. It's always evolving. But just don't settle for just one. You give yourself as much knowledge as possible for you and for whoever you're responding to.
Yeah. I had, I had something right at the beginning. I got so engaged in what you were saying. It just gone. It was just, oh, whoops. Yep, there goes. Goodbye. It just went to town and died. It's,
yep.
Let's see if I can. Let's see if I can recollect myself here first. Yeah, no, it's not brain fart. That is a straight brain death. It died.
As UH calls them, a bat.
A bat.
A brain attack.
Brain attack. No, this is the smell that smells like a brain fart. No, that is the decomposition of my brain at the moment.
Wow. Oh boy.
No, okay. No, actually, I just remembered it. Okay. So, as a volunteer, don't take advantage of the system. This goes for any level, but especially when you're young. If you are fortunate enough that your boss or your whatever company or business you work for outside fire service says, hey, yeah, I'm okay with you responding to EMS calls, fire calls, and whatnot. Do your due diligence. Do what you got to do. but don't be that one who, hey, everything's wrapped up and milking the time that they give you.
Yeah.
You know, it's like I'm not. I can't speak for everywhere. I know for us, a general squad call now, depending on whether we go to our nearest facility or if we go up to our trauma center, is anywhere from an hour to probably about 2 hours, give
Yeah.
or take. There. So I guess what I'm saying for us, if you come back for a callback and you're taking 4+ hours, barring extenuating circumstances for a standard squad call. I'm not talking about like extrication or anything like that. I'm talking a standard, hey, I have chest pain or I'm short of breath or something like that. If you're taking 4+ hours on that call, or meds were not given, or you didn't have to replace narcotics or other things like that, first of all, you're hurting everyone else because you're making everyone else look bad. Yeah. Second of all, you're hurting your company, who is waiting for you to come back. And third of all, you're hurting your own reputation because now you look like you're taking advantage of the system. So that would be my suggestion is don't take advantage of the system.
That's a very good one.
Yeah, you'll get a lot of leeway. Don't abuse it.
And I know people in other departments that do stuff like that. Like you said, besides like a trauma, usually we can turn out a squad call in 45 minutes to an hour. And that's not bad for us. Yeah. We don't have a hospital in our city, township, like some places do. They can be in and out and squad call in 25 minutes.
Well, there's a reason why most agencies, if they do pay out, they pay out like your first hour or two as a straight out, whatever that is, hour or two. There's a reason why, because they expect that that's how much time they will be taking from you minimum. So if that's all it takes, if you finish up, you go for a tone out for, say, like a CO detector, and you get there and they're like, hey, yeah, we get there. There's no problem of residence. There's no, go back to work. Don't sit there for 45 more minutes to, chew the cud over whatever. Go back to work, because that shows that you're willing to make these things work with your company. Right. I can tell you that one thing that has hurt the volunteer fire service immensely is people who have taken advantage of that, and then they're like, oh, well, you're just going to go off in every single fire call. You're never actually going to work for me or actually do anything.
Right.
Which then really makes a lot of companies not want to work with us at all.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's a very, very good point, too. Don't take advantage of it. Yeah. Simple. Be respectful to everybody, not just one person. Everybody, including yourself.
Yeah. So, well, we have gone on for... I'm sure we can continue going on.
Yeah.
But you got anything else to add, or anything else you want to say on this? Like, we will revisit this subject in other perspectives. Tonight was kind of some of the things, the challenges of the volunteer service and whatnot. We'll come back to this, but I'll do this because I'm sure you've forgotten. You can find us on Spotify. You can find us on YouTube. We do nice little shorts for TikTok for at least as long as that stays available to us. But that's where you can find us. We are planning, at least at this point, to come back every week and pick this back up again. So we're back for the long term. So, and as always, if you guys got any of your experiences, good or bad or indifferent, share with us. You got any questions or anything you'd like us to cover, anything you'd like us to talk about, we'd love to hear from you. We'd love to see your comments and, see what experiences you guys have had.
Yeah. Like I said, just whatever it is, just share with us. Questions, comments, experiences, please share. We want to hear them. There's no right or wrong.
Yeah, especially outside of the state of Ohio. We're pretty familiar with our little area in the state of Ohio, but if you come from like California, the far northeast, or the south, we'd love to hear from you.
Oh, absolutely.
Especially like those like western states, like the Western Plains states, like Montana and Utah and Nevada. Some of those places you really don't hear about a lot.
Yeah, that'd be awesome, actually.
So, all right. Well, and, thank you for listening. This has been Conflict of Leadership, the Coffee Table Edition. I have been Tim.
Jeremiah.
And we'll be back next week. It'll be the roulette as it always is to what our topic is. But join us next week for our next conversation.